Naomi screamed as her son's inhaler flew from his trembling hands, slapped away by the very officer sworn to protect him. Tyrese gasped, his small chest heaving, eyes wide with panic as he clutched at the air that refused to come. And just when it felt like hope was gone, the screech of tires cut through the rain, and a black SUV roared into the lot, about to change everything. It was just after 9:15 on a quiet Monday night when Naomi Ellis pulled her midnight blue Toyota Camry into Pump 7 at the corner gas station off Route 19 in Lakemont, Georgia. The rain had let up just enough to leave the pavement slick and glassy, reflecting the amber glow of the overhead lamps like a wet mirror. The place was nearly deserted. No music played from the pumps. No chatter from late-night travelers. Just the low hum of the refrigeration units inside the store and the faint buzz of a faulty streetlight flickering near the exit. Naomi stepped out with the practiced motion of someone whose body ran on routines and muscle memory. Her dark green scrubs clung to her skin at the collar, still damp from the burst 4 bag that had exploded during hour 9 of her 12-hour ICU shift. Her black hair was tied back in a low, weary bun, and the name badge clipped to her chest, Naomi Ellis, RN, swayed slightly as she moved toward the pump. Her face was striking but drawn, etched with the kind of quiet fatigue that only caregivers truly understood. She didn't sigh or complain. This wasn't exhaustion that needed to be spoken. This was just Monday. In the back seat, 11-year-old Tyrese Ellis sat curled in his hoodie, legs folded beneath him, tablet propped up on his knees. The glow from the screen lit up his brown face in flickers as he silently mouthed vocabulary words to himself. A disposable mask rested beneath his chin, not from fear, but from habit. Asthma had trained him to treat cold nights like a battlefield. His inhaler lay close beside him on the seat, like a sidearm. Ready. Naomi tapped on the glass. 2 minutes, baby. I'm just grabbing water. You good? Tyrese looked up, nodded. Doing flashcards. Good. Lock the door. She gave him a tired but loving half-smile, then turned toward the convenience store. Less than 30 feet away, a white Ford Interceptor sat idling by the air pump. Inside were officers Blake Redford and Zach Monroe. Redford was in his late 40s, with a thick neck, pasty skin, and a permanent squint like the world annoyed him just by existing. Monroe was younger, early 30s, with a wiry build, cropped blonde hair, and an edge about him that didn't come from experience but expectation. Both men looked up as Naomi exited her car. Redford whistled low. What we got here? Camry, custom rims, medical scrubs, that yours, sweetheart? Monroe smirked and sipped from his coffee cup. A nurse in a Camry at this hour? Probably not even her car. Let's go find out. They stepped out of the cruiser slowly, like they had all the time in the world. Not in a rush. Not responding to a call. Just prowling. Naomi noticed them immediately. She straightened, a reflex more than a decision, and kept one hand on the gas handle. Evening, officers, she said, level but polite. You own this car, ma'am? Redford asked, his eyes scanning everything but her face. Her hands. Her waist. Her chest. Her shoes. Yes, sir. Bought it 2 months ago. Registered in my name. She pulled her wallet from her scrub pocket and offered her ID and registration without being asked. Her voice stayed calm, clipped. Monroe walked around the back, inspecting the license plate with performative interest. We got a report on a vehicle matching this description, he muttered. Standard check. Naomi didn't argue. Of course. All documents are current. Redford took them without glancing at them, letting the papers dangle between his fingers like they were trash. You work at Lakemont General, he asked. Yes. ICU. Night shift. Funny, he said with a tilt of his head. Don't look like someone who drives a car like this. Naomi blinked. Once. Twice. Didn't bite. She'd heard it before. She knew exactly what it meant. In the car, Tyrese had stopped studying. He was watching now, shoulders stiff, fingers pressed against the edge of his hoodie. Something felt wrong. His mom's voice was flatter. Her hands were still. He reached into his backpack, slipped out his phone, and typed fast. Uncle Cal, cops. Gas station Route 19. Please come. Then he swiped to voice memos and hit record, tucking the phone under his hoodie near his chest. Naomi hadn't seen him. She was focused on Redford, who had stepped closer. You got anything in that car we should know about? He asked. My son, she replied, steady. He's in the back. Doing homework. That's it. Monroe leaned toward the window, cupping his hand to see inside. He looked a little older than 11. That him back there? Naomi nodded once. Yes. Please don't scare him. That's when she saw it, the handwritten sign on the store's door, security cameras out of order. Under repair. Her stomach turned. And she saw it click in their eyes too. Redford's smirk returned. Well, would you look at that, he said under his breath. Just as tonight. In the back seat, Tyrese held his breath. The red light on the recording app blinked beneath his jacket. Naomi's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from calculation. She treated men like them in the ER. She knew the bruises they left. I'd like my ID back now, she said clearly. I've complied with everything. There's no issue here. Redford didn't move. Then, slowly, he tossed the documents toward her chest. They fluttered to the wet concrete. You getting smart with us, nurse lady? He asked. Then how you talk to police where you come from? I'm speaking to you like a citizen, she replied, crouching to pick up the papers. Her fingers trembled, just slightly. You pulled me without cause. You have my ID. I've complied. Monroe circled toward the driver's side. Maybe she's hiding something. Keeps looking back at the car. I'm looking at my son, Naomi said, standing. He's scared. You're scaring him. 11, huh? Redford sneered. What kind of mom drags a kid out this late? You even his real mother? Naomi's jaw clenched. Don't talk about my son. Inside the car, Tyrese's breath grew shallow. His fingers clutched the inhaler, but he hadn't used it yet. Waiting. Hoping. You want to make a call? Monroe challenged. Go ahead. Call whoever you want. Hell, call the president. Naomi reached for her phone, fury now bleeding into her movement. But before her thumb hit the screen, Redford slapped the device from her hand. It skidded under the car. You don't make calls when we're talking to you. That's my personal property. Naomi barked, stepping forward. Redford shoved her back. Monroe grabbed her arm and twisted it behind her. Stop resisting. My son is watching, she screamed. That little faker? Monroe spat, pointing at Tyrese. Ain't nothing wrong with him. Tyrese's lungs clenched tight. He lifted the inhaler to his mouth, but his hands shook too hard to press it. Mom, he wheezed, barely audible. Mom. I can't, Naomi shrieked. He's having an asthma attack. He needs that inhaler. Shut your mouth. Redford yelled, yanking open the rear door and smacking the inhaler out of Tyrese's hand. No damn kid fakes an attack to get out of trouble. Tyrese curled forward, wheezing violently. Naomi broke free, diving for the inhaler. Press it, baby. Now. Monroe grabbed her again, wrenching her backward. That's it. You just earned yourself a charge. You're hurting her. Tyrese cried out, voice cracking. Now the little punk's got a mouth too, Redford snarled. You both think you're above the law tonight. The air snapped before the screech even registered. A black Chevy Suburban tore into the lot, brakes screaming. The headlights sliced through the drizzle like a searchlight. Redford reached for his belt. Monroe flinched toward his taser. But the driver's side door opened, and out stepped a tall black man in a charcoal suit, his movements calm, deliberate, commanding. "Federal Prosecutor Calvin Rhodes," he announced, holding his badge high. "Take your hands off my sister right now." Silence. Cold. Immediate. Redford's fingers twitched at his holster, but didn't move. Monroe froze mid-step. "She was resisting," Redford said. "No," Calvin said, his voice low, deadly. "She was surviving. What you two were doing, that was unlawful force. And you just did it in front of a federal witness." Behind him, 2 black and white patrol cars rolled in quietly. Officers stepped out, hands already moving toward protocol. "Officers Redford and Monroe," Calvin stated flatly. "Disarm them. Now." The younger officers didn't hesitate. As they approached, Redford snarled and threw his belt onto the hood of the cruiser. "This is BS. She should have just stayed home." Calvin didn't flinch. "Keep talking, Redford. You'll be explaining that to a judge in 24 hours. As paramedics rushed toward Naomi and Tyrese, Calvin knelt beside his nephew. "You did good, son," he whispered. "You saved your mama tonight." Tyrese nodded faintly, the inhaler finally steady in his grip. Naomi, tears streaking through rain on her cheeks, looked at her brother. "How did you know?" "He texted me," Calvin said. "And he recorded everything." Naomi turned, looked at the gas station door, at the dark sign about broken cameras. They thought no one was watching. Calvin helped her to her feet. Someone was. And for the first time that night, Naomi allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to end in silence. The morning after the gas station incident, the city of Lakemont was still drenched in silence, but it wasn't the calm kind. It was the type of silence that held its breath, waiting for something to break. Calvin Rhodes hadn't slept. He sat in his downtown office at City Hall, sleeves rolled up, jaw clenched, a black tablet glowing in front of him. The video was paused on the exact frame where his sister Naomi was shoved into her car, her face twisted in shock, her son gasping behind her. Across the table sat 2 legal advisors from the federal division, both pale, both visibly unsettled. They didn't need to say much. The footage spoke louder than any summary could. The audio from Tyrese's phone played like a confession tape, the mocking tone in Redford's voice, the scorn from Monroe, the dull thud of Naomi's body against metal, and worst of all, the hollow, wheezing cries of a child trying to breathe while his inhaler was slapped from his reach. "We go public," Calvin said flatly. "No hesitation. No delay. This doesn't get buried in paperwork. We go today." By 10:30 a.m., a press conference was scheduled in the smaller media room on the 2nd floor of City Hall. No fanfare. No prepared flag-waving speech. Just a microphone, a blank wall, and a city waiting for answers. The press was already buzzing. Rumors had spread from late-night police scanners and the sudden call for internal affairs to appear. But no one expected the first image on the presentation screen to be a still from a child's recording. Naomi's face. Then Tyrese. Then the moment Monroe raised his hand. Calvin stepped up to the mic, not in a suit, but in a simple white dress shirt, no tie. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and cold. "Last night," he began, "2 officers in this city stopped a black woman, my sister, at a gas station for no legal reason. They insulted her. Assaulted her. They struck her son and denied him medical access during an asthma attack. They believed they could get away with it because there were no working cameras. But they were wrong. The footage rolled for only 30 seconds, no sound, just raw, time-stamped imagery. Enough to burn into memory. When it ended, the room erupted. Reporters shouted over one another. Was Naomi Ellis hospitalized? Will the officers be suspended or charged? Is it true the child recorded the entire incident? Calvin held up a hand. This is not about family, he said, gaze level. This is about the law. Effective immediately, Officers Blake Redford and Zach Monroe have been placed under administrative suspension pending investigation and formal criminal charges. They will be disarmed, relieved of their duties, and subject to federal review. And for the record, the video you just saw came from an 11-year-old boy who stayed calm while adults failed him. Across the city, phones vibrated. Screens lit up. Hashtags appeared in waves, hashtag justice for Naomi. Hashtag protect our children. Hashtag Legmont speaks. Within hours, Naomi's story was on local news. By the afternoon, it had made national headlines. Comment sections filled with outrage, disbelief, and support. But in Legmont, something deeper began to move. The first protest wasn't organized by a civil rights group. It started with 5 nurses from Naomi's ICU unit standing quietly outside City Hall in their scrubs. By noon, they were joined by firemen, by teachers, by churchgoers holding handmade signs. One read, "My child has asthma too." Another, "Your badge doesn't erase our breath." They didn't chant. They stood. Together. In the precinct holding room, Officers Redford and Monroe sat cuffed to a steel bench. Redford's face was flushed red, jaw clenched so tight a vein bulged in his neck. "This is crap," he muttered. "We didn't do anything they couldn't twist." Monroe nodded, lips thin. "All this over some punk kid with a phone? They're making us the villains because his uncle's got a badge." A young officer outside the room, new to the force, still green, heard every word. He said nothing, but his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his holster. Back at City Hall, Naomi sat in a quiet conference room with Calvin and a trauma counselor. Her arm was wrapped from wrist to elbow. Her expression was still, almost too still. Tyrese sat beside her, sipping orange juice from a styrofoam cup, knees pulled up, blanket over his lap. He hadn't said much since the ambulance ride. But his eyes were sharp, listening. He'd seen something he wouldn't forget. "You don't have to speak to the press," Calvin told Naomi gently. "We can shield you from all that." Naomi shook her head. "This isn't about me. It's about what they thought they could get away with." Her voice didn't tremble. It cut. That evening, as dusk settled in and the rain returned in scattered patches, local news aired a direct message from Calvin's office. The footage was clean, short, and deliberate. "To every citizen who's ever felt unsafe where they should feel protected," Calvin said into the camera, "we see you. To every parent who worries how their child will be treated during a simple traffic stop, we hear you. And to those who wear the badge and think it places them above the law, your time is up." That night, Legmont didn't sleep. Not out of fear, but out of momentum. Candlelight vigils formed outside the hospital where Naomi worked. A group of teens, many of them black and brown, held signs with Tyrese's name and the word brave in bold blue paint. People who had never marched before were now standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers. Not because someone told them to, but because they felt it was finally time. Inside the holding cells, Redford and Monroe were moved to separate facilities under protective protocol. The word had spread fast. No one wanted them walking freely in uniform, not even other officers. The local Fraternal Order of Police issued a lukewarm statement, citing ongoing investigation and commitment to due process. But few were listening. The public had seen too much. The clip of Tyrese wheezing, Naomi screaming, and Redford slapping the inhaler had played over 2 million times in under 24 hours. Across online forums, people shared their own stories. Some quiet. Some horrifying. All connected. Naomi, who had never considered herself an activist, now found herself answering phone calls from advocacy groups, legal representatives, even medical associations. She said little. She wanted action. Calvin drafted preliminary policy reform that same week. He called it the Community Guardian Initiative, aiming to require body cams for all officer interactions and implement a civilian oversight board for misconduct cases. The first version was met with resistance. But the second? The second had momentum behind it. Because the public wasn't waiting this time. They were watching. Demanding. In the days that followed, the mayor's office was flooded with letters, handwritten, emailed, typed. Some came from patients Naomi had treated. Others from mothers of black boys with asthma. All said the same thing: thank you for not staying silent. Calvin hung one note on the wall of his office. It was written in crayon, from a fourth grader. It said, "Tell the police to be nice. Because some of us don't get a second breath." And beneath it, in shaky letters, "Tyrese is my hero." Naomi read it the next morning and cried for the first time since that night. Not because of the pain, but because somewhere, in all the chaos, something had begun to shift. And that shift? It wasn't loud. It wasn't finished. But it was real. And it was growing. The storm that swept through Lakemont in the days following the press conference didn't come with thunder or broken windows, it came with resolve. The city didn't riot. It rose. And by the end of the week, Naomi Ellis found herself sitting in a wooden chair inside the courtroom of Fulton County, her left arm still wrapped in a sling, her eyes forward, her son Tyrese seated beside her in a button-down shirt that he said made him look older. His feet didn't quite touch the ground, but his jaw was set, and his grip on her hand was firm. From the second the doors opened that morning, the courtroom had been packed, not with spectators, but with witnesses. Nurses still in scrubs, janitors who'd worked the night shift, teachers who took personal days, mothers who brought their children in early with juice boxes and quiet instructions to stay still. They didn't carry signs or chant slogans. They simply sat and stared. A presence, not a protest. The kind of silence that says we've seen this before, but not like this. Not this time. Judge Evelyn Marks entered with the weight of decades in her stride, her robe immaculate, her gaze unflinching. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced, and the hum of whispers evaporated. The prosecution didn't waste time with flowery openings. They let the video speak first. The footage from Tyrese's phone filled the screen, Naomi's calm voice, the officer's escalating tone, the impact, the inhaler flying across the seat, the wheezing. Every exhale from Tyrese sounded like a cry someone had tried to smother. The jury barely moved. They didn't need to. The recording wasn't a story, it was proof. Then came the surprise witness. A maintenance technician from the gas station, late 50s, white, with grease under his fingernails and a shy tilt in his voice. "I fixed that camera 2 days before," he explained, pointing to the footage. "Didn't log it because I thought it wasn't important. Guess I was wrong." The video synced with Tyrese's. Audio perfectly, frame for frame. The defense lawyers tried, of course. Monroe's attorney claimed Naomi had displayed a noncompliant posture. Redford's lawyer argued that they were responding to a suspected vehicle theft and that the child's reaction was difficult to gauge. But the courtroom wasn't buying it. Especially not after Naomi took the stand. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. Her testimony came like a surgical incision, precise, clean, exposing everything beneath. "I wasn't scared for myself," she said plainly. "I was scared I wouldn't reach my son's inhaler in time. And if my brother hadn't come when he did, I'm not sure I'd be sitting here today." Her words didn't ask for pity. They demanded reckoning. Tyrese wasn't asked to speak, but the judge allowed his audio recording to be played in full. The courtroom sat through every second. The slap. The gasps. The way Monroe's voice mocked him. The breathless scream of a child in distress. And when the recording ended, no one moved. Not for a long moment. Then the prosecutor spoke one final line: "Your Honor, the state rests." The jury returned in less than 3 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Excessive force. Assault. Child endangerment. False reporting. When the judge read the verdict, Naomi didn't cheer. Neither did Calvin, sitting a few rows back, his hands folded and face tight. But Tyrese leaned into his mother and whispered, "Does this mean it's over?" And she whispered back, "It means they have to answer for what they did." As the courtroom emptied, a small group of people gathered quietly outside the courthouse steps. A few clapped. Most just stood. Among them were patients Naomi had treated, families who'd watched the video in horror, and strangers who had simply seen themselves in her story. A woman with gray braids and a fire department hoodie approached Tyrese and handed him a glass case. Inside was a bent, partially burned police badge, its number faded. "My brother was a good cop," she said. "He left the force when he realized it wasn't built to protect people like us." "That badge? It's not a trophy. It's a reminder of what's broken and who's brave enough to fix it." Tyrese looked at Naomi, unsure. She nodded. He took the case and held it to his chest. Not proudly. Carefully. Calvin met them at the base of the courthouse steps, flanked by reporters who kept their distance. "It's not the end," he told Naomi, his voice low. "But it's a start." 2 weeks later, the Lakemont City Council chamber was packed for a very different reason. After a series of emergency votes, public hearings, and legal reviews, the council prepared to vote on new legislation, the Tyrese Ellis Act. If passed, it would mandate the use of functioning body cameras for all traffic stops, with felony-level charges for any officer who deactivated, tampered with, or failed to report footage. It would also establish an independent civilian review board with subpoena power. Naomi didn't want to be on that board. She didn't want to relive that night over and over. But when the time came, she showed up anyway. Because she understood now, it wasn't about being ready. It was about being willing. When the vote passed unanimously, a cheer rose from the chamber, but Naomi didn't smile. She simply nodded and looked at her son, sitting in the front row, fiddling with the edge of the glass badge case in his lap. He didn't smile either. But he sat taller. Back at school, Tyrese walked a little differently. Not louder. Not prouder. Just firmer. When a classmate asked if he wanted to be a cop when he grew up, he shook his head. "I want to be a trauma surgeon," he said. "But I'll remember everything I saw." Naomi returned to Lakemont General the next Monday night. Her co-workers greeted her not with balloons or streamers, but with quiet nods and respectful silence. During her rounds, she passed a patient, an older black woman recovering from heart surgery, who reached out and gently grabbed her wrist. "You made it easier for the next nurse who looks like you," the woman whispered. Naomi didn't say anything. She just squeezed the woman's hand once, then moved on. Because sometimes, healing doesn't come from justice. It comes from knowing the next time might be different. That maybe, just maybe, the next mother won't have to reach for a phone with shaking hands. That the next child won't have to press record. That someone will already be watching. Weeks turned into months. The headlines faded. The protests quieted. But something had cracked open in Lakemont. A door. A conversation. A system that couldn't go back to pretending. And from that crack, as small as it was, light began to shine. As the author of this story, I want to speak to you, not just as a writer, but as someone who believes deeply in the power of truth, courage, and accountability. What happened to Naomi and Tyrese Ellis isn't fiction for too many families across America. It's a reflection of real fears, real injustice, and a painful reality that still plays out in neighborhoods, backroads, and yes, even gas stations, far more often than it should. But this story also reminds us of something else, something even stronger than the fear: resilience. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't lash out. She stood her ground with quiet strength. And her son, just 11 years old, didn't panic. He used what he had, his phone, his instincts, his voice, to protect his mother and himself. That bravery, in the face of power and threat, changed an entire city. The lesson here is not just about injustice. It's about what happens after the moment of harm. Will we speak up? Will we show up? Will we use the evidence we carry, not just in our hands, but in our hearts, to demand better from the systems meant to protect us? For the lawmakers and leaders, the message is clear: policies without accountability are just paper. But for the rest of us, for the nurses, the students, the single parents, the bystanders who choose to not look away, we have power too. And when we stand together, even the most silent cities can begin to awaken. To every listener, every viewer, every person who took the time to sit with this story today, thank you. Thank you for caring. Thank you for feeling. Thank you for refusing to turn away. Here at us, Justice Stories, our mission is to share more than just headlines. We tell the stories behind the silence. Stories that speak to the pain, but also to the possibility of change. If you felt something today, I hope you'll carry it forward. Share it. Talk about it. Use it. And as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this community, one that believes in justice, truth, and healing. Until next time, stay aware, stay compassionate, and never underestimate the light that can come from a single crack.